a good man whom I both loved and should not have married.
Hello.
Because the day.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Okay, I'm super excited. So
Yay!
it is my pleasure tonight that I get to introduce all of our Fat 50 community to a new friend that we have, Lolita Lopez out of the California area. So Lolita, I want to introduce you and so excited. We've been working on this for a few weeks now, but so excited for you to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I'm repping Harvard volleyball. That was for Ashley, who was like, "Of course you are." Harvard Dartmouth rivalry. Hi everyone. I am Lolita Lopez. I am currently in Los Angeles. I'm an investigative reporter here and an anchor for the NBC locally. But I am also come from a sports background, both as an athlete myself, but also as a sports journalist. I was in New York prior to being in LA. I've been here now 14 years, and I was in New York at WPIX for 13, almost the same amount of time. I'm just realizing 14 years there. And 8 of those years, I was the sports anchor for WPIX, as well as the Mets on-field reporter for 2 of those years. So I covered sports as a journalist, then went back to news, kind of a little rigmarole. And one of the caveats of me moving here was going not just back to news, which I really adore and love because it's very diverse, but I get to cover sports when it comes up in the ways that I would like to cover. And I'm so grateful that NBC is the home of the Olympics. So I get to cover Southern California athletes that either train or are from this area, which happens to be about 3/4 of all of the Team USA athletes. SoCal is a place that they want to be. And this year, I'll be going to Paris to cover the games there. So I'm super, super excited. You'll find me under the Eiffel Tower with the rest of beach volleyball. So I'm stoked for that. But covering a myriad of sports. I come from a sports family. I played volleyball and ran track at Harvard. 2-time captain there my junior and senior year. In track, I did high jump and 800. But then when we were indoor, I did the pentathlon. So kind of have delved into a little bit of everything. And I am currently still someone who's trying to prove it on the court. So I play every Sunday with a group of guys. There's one other girl that plays. We play grass and we just have a great time. I used to be in indoor leagues and stuff, but the knees kind of gave way. So grass is better. And then I'm also a coach. So I am currently the coach for Crown City Sports Academy, which is the former Forza West. There's 3 Forzas in Southern California. There's the North and the South, and then we were West. So there was an ownership change. And so they went to Crown City or C2 Sports. It's the same owner from before. Her name is Tiara Tuatama. And she and I actually coached together on the same team. So I'm 17's ones team, and I love it. I've been doing it since the pandemic full time. I was helping out when other coaches couldn't make it because of COVID restrictions within their family, and just really adored what it gave me and how I could give back in that way, but also just teaching the game in the way that I remember learning it. I'm originally from Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, we didn't have positions. Everybody just played everything and you learned everything. And so I'm 5'6", who always was meant to believe that I was 6'4". So that was sort of the gauge on who we were as athletes. And they wanted to create good, strong athletes. And that's hopefully what I can share with our girls. Actually have practice tonight. So soon after I sign off with you guys, I'm out. But it's been really wonderful. I love that I have been able to use my passion and my studies and turn that into a career that is both varied and diverse and continues to sort of create its own world even now as I'm, 26 years into my career.
And so with you saying you're from Puerto Rico, I will share with them that you actually know one of our a personal coach to us, Cholo,
Yep.
and all that he's doing for us. You want to share your relationship?
Puerto Rico is this big. And when you're in communities, especially in sports communities, you kind of know everyone. And Cholo is like, had camps and, had his own club team. And he was just really prolific, or is really prolific on the island with younger people. Obviously, like my daughter, when she played, she no longer plays, but when she played, was coached here in the States, in Los Angeles. But, you just go there and people. Like I have friends who play professionally in Puerto Rico, and so they knew Cholo, and then now their kids are training with him. He's just one of those people that everybody sort of knows, and he has a really great head for volleyball. He just has a pleasant personality. He's strong and very hard in terms of learning the sports, but at the same time just has a really caring hand, and just loves the game. Loves the game. So yeah, it's funny. So when you mentioned someone in volleyball, like I just went and saw the San Diego Mojo play in their inaugural home opener, and the libero for their team is from Cagua. She plays on my hometown team. So I was like, "Oh, you're a Criolla?" She's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Do you know Mariana?" She's like, "Oh my God, Mariana!" Like, so it's like everybody like that. So even though I haven't been in Puerto Rico, I used to play, like when I was in college, I would go back and play on one of the pro teams there at the time, and train with the national team for a little bit, just to kind of keep myself in shape while I went back to college. I never did any competition with them. And it's just a great place, for not just for volleyball, but for any sport. But for volleyball, we just played. Everybody played, and you played all the time, and it was fantastic.
Right. So of course, I know that you have been working on some amazing projects, like getting ready and preparing for Paris 2024. And of course, if you can't share, do you want to tell them, because some of our ambassadors have gone to one of the locations where you've been preparing. Do you want to share, like, just give them just a little sneak peek?
Sure. Yes, sure. None of it is proprietary, so I can share all the stories. They haven't aired yet, but what we're doing right now is, because we're kind of getting into what I call the nitty gritty, no touch time, which means like once these athletes are all into training, it's really hard to get with them on a more personal level, or to, to interrupt their practice schedule. Because, what I find is, like, as we all know, we have our championships every year, and there's world championships and all of these things that matter. But these Olympics come every 4 years, and it's just such an honor, one, to like represent your country and to play, but also for the athletes, it's like they don't want to miss a second or a chance to not be able to go. And so it's all about the games. And so we have the way we're doing it, we're sending 2 teams. And so it's myself and then Lynette Romero, who's our morning anchor. And she's more kind of fanfare, and I'm more like sports, but we'll divide up the sports. So I've been kind of tracking over the last year and a half a couple of sports. So I do track, volleyball, beach volleyball, and believe it or not, archery. I want to do women's basketball. It's just, it's what it is. And obviously track and field. My dad used to coach internationally. He was women's track and field coach for Rice University for almost 40 years, which is why my K through 12 my upbringing was actually in Houston, Texas. Mm-hmm. So I've grown around collegiate sports, professional sports all my life. And so I just was kind of ingrained in the blood. But yeah, so the projects that I'm doing, so I sat down with Sarah Hughes and Kelly Chang, getting back together after their USC days. We went to USC, and where I was able to get Dane Blanton and a couple of some of the younger players there. Some of the players that I've already seen play, like Megan Kraft, play on the international circuit already. What's so cool is, like, because beach volleyball and other volleyballs is now at such a high level collegiate here in the United States, it's just really propelling players that would have had to have waited to do certain things. Like your skills and your level are actually really like on a world class, as we're seeing with someone I'm interviewing on Friday, which is Andy Benish and Miles Partain, who kind of took the world beach by storm last year, and winning gold twice in 2 events. And now their points structure has them, as well as Kelly and Sarah, points wise, being the top leaders for Team USA. So they will be going to Paris for the Olympics and have like qualified, if you will. But then last week, the reason I had to miss this meeting last week is I was sent down to the Chula Vista Training Center down near San Diego and caught up with the archery team. What's awesome is like I don't know anything about archery. Actually learned how to shoot there and like what it means, but you just the backgrounds of athletes, where they come from, kind of their inspiration. It's just so fused together with like things that I know and that I can relate to, obviously not on that level, but just as an athlete of all levels, you can have that sort of sensibility. Sometimes it's like who you're playing for, what you're doing. Other times it's how you got in it. So it's really fascinating to watch them do their work. And I sat down with Coach Karai, who like secretly, but not so secretly, I was like, by the way, sir, I had a poster of you on my wall for many, many years. And he's like cracking up because he looks exactly like my poster, but years later. And that was such a joy because it was like, my idol, and I'm like sitting there because of what I do, getting to talk to him. Like it was insane. And then the two Jordans, Jordan Palter and Jordan Larson, who are both were here locally doing stuff. Jordan now coaching herself up in Nebraska at her alma mater, and then Palter was like rehabbing her knee. So they were here because, as you know, so many of the women are playing professionally, and it's not until about like May that they come back because they have a couple of tournaments that they play together, which I think a lot of people don't understand. So those are sort of like the little like things that like when I learn about it, we'll talk about, because these are all professionals trying to, do their thing wherever it is that they're paying professionally. But when they come together as Team USA, they kind of have to like kind of regroup, right? To know who they are. So that's what we have so far. And then we're just getting more and more material over the next couple of weeks before, like I said, everything starts to sort of slow down on our end, because these athletes really just need to train. I mean, we're so close. So.
Right. Well, what I love about, of course, I love when I first came up with the idea of our Fat 50 tune-ups and the series, and talking with our CEO, Ashley, and the different series, like selections that we were going to have. She immediately was like, I want my friend Lolita to actually, and we started talking about the different topics. And one thing, communication, the art of an interview. Yes. And as everyone can see, just, our first, less than 15 minutes in, just really how you communicate so well. So if we can just one through this.
It really is important. So I'll do it in stages, because I know a lot of our ambassadors have already sort of made it into like the stage of getting into college and communicating that way. But I do it as with C2, with the club that I'm in. I'm also the director of recruiting. And a lot of it is just to be their guide, because what I'm trying to teach these young ladies at 16, 15, 14, 17 is how to communicate with an adult they don't know, how to make yourself visible to someone, how to write an email, a proper email that has good grammar and punctuation and will set yourself apart from someone else, and why it is that you need to do some research before you send it in on either the school or the program, so that you understand, so that the other person on the other side understands where you're coming from. Because like I told them, like these coaches get emails all the time. Why should yours matter more? And so we kind of showcase the individual athletes as well as, but it's a lot of it is just to get them prepared to have these kinds of conversations. I find it very interesting how difficult it is for a lot of young people to speak directly to someone, how to look a person in the eye, how to have, a conversation that's not just a one word, yes, okay, because that's not as descriptive. And so when you get to a program where a lot of, the ambassadors are likely in, you're going to become a high level or a headline, or eyes will be on you because of what you do and where you're doing it. That could be on a national level, or it could be the local and or the collegiate radio station, newspaper. But all of those things matter, because how you communicate and what you say helps present yourself in the way that you want to be presented, and also your team and your college. And so all of those things are kind of inextricably like connected. Like I tell our girls, the way you walk in a gym, how you do that, how you set your bags at the bench, how you eat together, how you talk to each other, how you talk to your parents on the sidelines. All of those things are being watched and mattered. And we want, when we wear this, to make it feel like, oh, those girls, those are great athletes. We've seen them. You always are trying to handle yourself to the utmost of, respect for yourself as well as the others around you. And it's interesting that we talk about this and that this comes up today, because the interview is so important, like I said, because of different facets. But obviously the situation with the racism that the team from Utah, with women's basketball, had to deal with in Idaho, and moving hotels,
Right.
that's, I would have said 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even, that's a story that the schools would have hush. No one was going to talk about it. Don't everybody know, no one said anything. And now it's something that obviously the coach was prepared for. She became the voice that spoke about it. She could have, and possibly will, later on, designate a player or two to be able to speak. And then those players will have some sort of talking points, if not discussion points, because reporters and journalists will ask you a series of questions. If there's something that you're not comfortable with, you can even say it that way. So it's being honest and truthful in your communication, but also being prepared. For the same research that I tell my young girls to do on the colleges that they want to go to, players that are already in it, and they know that they have to speak to the media to make sure that they are prepared to do so. One of the things, so in a difficult situation like that, I think, Andrika, we were talking about how usually there's someone that gets designated. It could be the captain, it could be one of the players, it could be the player that was most affected by whatever it is, and maybe she wants to talk. And it doesn't have to be a situation that's now at the headline national level. Let's say there's a rivalry between two players, and 3 games ago or last year, those two players got into it. So what does that look like today? I think of LSU and Caitlin Clark, remember the face thing, there's always something. And so being able to speak about any one of those events, how it was back then, how it is in that moment, in the present, is really important, to have your communication skills as well as your talking points ready to go, so that you don't fall stray to anyone who's trying to get something out of you, trying to get a rise. Because I think at the end of the day, we want to present ourselves in the way that we want to be seen. And sometimes it's hard, right? Sometimes someone will push and you're angry about something, or you want to say, well, that's a dumb thing to tell me, or that's stupid or whatever, but you have to be as poised as you can. So one of the things that I like to do is, knowing if there's a situation that already, going into it, being prepared with the expectation that you're going to be asked or talk about these 3 things. And if it's not, if something happens during the game, if a fight breaks out, if someone gets injured, knock on wood, if something happens like that, knowing that that might be part of the conversation. So whoever is designated to speak will be asked, what was it like when so-and-so left? And, making sure that you're kind of prepared for those things. And sometimes you're not prepared for everything, but I think for the most part, and especially as you continue to do it, really feeling that you have those things in place will calm the nerves a little bit and allow you to speak more eloquently, and to have that poise that you really want, and take the time to have already thought out something. So it just isn't something that you blurt out. Because unfortunately, not myself, and not really a good journalist, but some people take bits and pieces, and then that's what they use to create a headline.
Right. And even staying current in, I mean, because with that incident that happened in Utah, with the Utah team, if that came up, and of course, if a reporter asked, say tomorrow night, if they ask, one of the basketball players, and they're like, I don't know what's going on. I mean, you need to be current on what's going on.
Yes.
So,
and that's such a good point, because you could be after the UCLA Creighton game, I wouldn't be surprised if they went up to one of the players and was like, hey, did you hear about what happened in Utah? And you're like, what happened in Utah? Right. And so that's also to a really good point. And every team should have a process of how to speak to the media and what to say. Right. And so if something comes up like that, there should be what we had. They didn't do it that often, but what we had when I was there at Harvard would be something Oh, thank you for asking us about that. Let me get back to you. I have to go to our captain and coach to get more information. Do you know what I mean? And you just kind of like shut it down. And
Right.
it could be anything. Like, did you hear about how the football players thought the volleyball players were terrible? Like, whatever, right? Like, I
Right.
did. I could make a face and say whatever, but I don't know my facts, and I don't know if they know their facts. So it is really about being on top of what you do. And
Right.
also, the other thing is like having good talking points also makes sure that you tell the message you want, right?
Right.
So someone's going to be focused on one negative thing that happened in this one moment of the 90-minute game. And it's so frustrating because I've seen it. I know like what happened. So it's important to bring the conversation back to your points, right?
Right.
So what
Right.
you want to, what your message is as your team. Yeah, it's really, that's a really uncomfortable situation. And I know it's something that we're all going to discuss, but, we have a team of 12 girls who are really, together, and that's how we've gotten here. And, we're really proud of this win and da, da, da. We can't wait. You know what I'm saying? You
Right.
like restructure. And I think it's a really important way of like getting yourself right back into like what you want to say.
Right.
Not easy. That takes a little bit, but it's definitely something like you want to talk about that win. It's easy to talk about the fight that took 2 minutes. Like,
Right.
let's talk about the win,
Right.
like.
Right. And people always remember like, oh my gosh, did you hear how she answered that question?
Mhm. Yeah.
Versus someone did a great interview. It's like, wait a minute, what about how great she did? They just remember how you met.
Well, and also like that, I I joke with people that I wish I had a mask sometimes because I'll be like, like I'll make a face and I'm like, wait, I just said something, right?
Yeah.
I literally just said something without saying something in words. So also knowing, and I use a lot of expression and a lot of hands. So like when I was younger, my mom was like, I see what you're trying to say. And I'd be like, cause I would make a face,
Right.
he's like,
Right.
this is as much control as what you're saying as well. So,
Right.
you bring up a good point that it is, and a lot, you have to muster a lot because there's just so much going on in the world of collegiate sports now. It's at such a high level. The women's game is such a high level with eyes on it, which is all fantastic. 26 years ago, we didn't have a single like network television like wanting to do what's happening now. And now like the women's game is getting more ratings than the men.
Right.
That things are being sold out. So in a way it's wonderful, but it comes with a lot of this type of responsibility because you are now the focus of people. And, I grew up with a player from the Houston Astros, Jose Cruz. And I remember we'd go out and like, he'd always be stopped and he'd be stopped. And and he's like, this is also part of the job. Like I have a job on the field and also part of my job is to be, with fans and do that. Now, if there's a moment where I'm trying to, or if someone oversteps, like sometimes he got followed into bathrooms and stuff. And he's like, okay, this is where we draw the line. But like, you can say that respectfully, but it's part of it. And I always retain that in the back of my mind, like every single part of what I do is connected. Right. And so, I always make sure that like I present myself in the best way I can. I mean, I'm silly and goofy and do dingy stuff all the time, but I'm just saying for the most part, it's being, making sure that that's always a focus as well. But the interview is a really, really something that I also recommend teams practicing.
Right. And remember, I shared with you when we were talking, we did something fun at our last summit that we have one of our ambassadors, if she's watching, Kenzie McGatlin, she's an LSU commit.
Yay, congrats.
And Kenzie, I mean, I told her, I said, she's ready for an interview. I mean,
that's right.
Like, can I do it again? Can I do it again? And Kenzie was like, I mean, she looked dead in the camera, no ums, no stutters. I mean, she was ready to go. So I was like, Russell and Katie, the two Katies, I mean, they have a good one coming because she was just so polished. But it was so funny when I said, great job, you're ready to go. She's like, really? I'm like, just the confidence now is just to be like, she's good to go. So, but that's great. So let's do like a little fire drill right now. So you being a former collegiate athlete and a coach, when you're giving like advice to get, like when they're sending like a communication, like their email, what are like key points that you would say they definitely need? Of course, not sending an email that's like so long that coaches are just sifting through? What would you say that they definitely in the body of the email they need to hit to sell themselves?
So I would start in the subject line, making it a bold point with your name in it, making sure that like if they have 400,000 emails and they're looking at it, that they see, like, I'll give you an example. When I do a recruiting email and I do follow-ups with coaches, once I know the particular athlete has already spoken to them, it'll say, let's talk about Megan Lee. And then it's like dash from Lolita Lopez C2 Academy or Crown City. So right there, you know who I'm talking about, what I want to talk about, and who I am. Right.
Okay.
So like it's immediate there in the subject line. So it'd be something like that. So if it's, future tournaments or tournaments for the rest of the season from blah, blah, blah athlete, that's already, the coach already knows what it is that this athlete is trying to, relay to them in terms of information. And in the body of the email, it's just be direct and avoid shoulda, woulda, coulda, tries. So instead of saying, I would love to ask you, like, please, I would love to meet with you further or get on a phone call with you at your earliest convenience. I would say it more like, I hope you're doing well. Please let me know what times would work for you to schedule a call. That direct language, it's not a question. And it's something that especially a lot of females do, women do kind of across the board, is the ask, the I'm sorry, but like they know there's an ask, they know there's a thing, like, it's being direct and really focused on how you're saying it and using words, like more direct words is better than having that passive voice. So I think that's always like happens. And I think that it's if it's somewhere where you want to go, definitely putting in that email or something like that, something that you know about the school, the program, something that sets you apart. One of the girls, we did some research on a school she wanted to go to, and I was like, a female coach at this level, coaching for 18 years, that's pretty cool. Like I would kind of look that up, and she did. And in the email, I was like, Coach, I read this is your 18th season. What an amazing feat. I know that, my understanding is like, women at this level, like, so, congratulations to you. And the coach immediately was like, oh, she read something about me. She's like, you know what I mean? And like,
Right.
and I said, that's something that you need to like be able to understand, but it's also just now for your knowledge, like that's a program that has longevity, that doesn't have a rotating door of like a bunch of different coaches. I mean, you can go to a place where you think it's great, but like the training isn't as what you thought. Right. And so it's kind of like explaining that. And so I would keep everything direct and succinct, but with some sort of detail or knowledge that you've done research that somebody else hasn't for whatever it is that you're asking for.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So now what some of the girls have said, like, okay, well, after they commit, and then it's like that awkward phase, like when I see my coach in person, like, like what should the conversation look like, after that?
Post?
Like, yeah, seeing them at a tournament, or going back to camp, like, because now the nerves are gone because now they know the coach wants them.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say the conversation should?
Yeah, but I will say, like, I mean, nothing is final, and this is, ladies and gents, I don't know if it's, I always say everybody, folks, it's throughout, because I know of player, I don't know the player, but I know of a situation, at least one, but there's several that, the commitments were pulled based on actions by players that the coaches did not like, that they saw later at a tournament. So some of these verbal commitments or some of these things sometimes can be pulled away. So it is important to stay engaged and to always, be, of your most best self when you're there, whether it's talking to other players, being on the sidelines, talking to your parents. It's a parent thing that's like really interesting. This one player was berating her mom on the sideline, and the coach, the collegiate coach that was recruiting her, saw that and pulled the ask and said, I want someone who's going to talk to their mom like that. And everybody was like, what? I mean, a very good player, but it's a hard lesson to learn, right? When that happens, but I know of that situation that happened. So what I would say is like, stay engaged. I do this actually with my athletes in recruiting. They're like, well, it's been a little bit, and I just send an email that's like, we're currently on spring break. We're working towards our next tournament, which is Lone Star down in Dallas. We haven't been in that tournament in 10 years. Really looking forward to some Southern competition. Please let me know how your team is doing. Would love to learn more about the mini camp this summer. That's a real succinct, easy way of staying engaged, telling them what you're doing, but also asking about what they're doing, right? It's kind of continuing a conversation because it's important for both sides to know that there's interest and continued engagement. So it's not like, oh, this is done, I'm just going to, not talk to this person again. It's really just continuing to like move that forward. And I think that that's a really important thing.
Okay, good. That was awesome. Okay, so now let's move on to interviews, like tips on interviews. So say when an athlete is pulled to the side after a win, what are tips that you would say that they should kind of jot down or start rehearsing? Like they should always start practicing and rehearsing, like, right? Because they never know like when they're going to have to do the interview, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they should. And it's, think of like one or two key moments in the game that led to the win. It could be such and such had dropped 61 points, or such and such had 8 aces, and that person, or it could be, we were down in this set at this point, and at that moment, like coach brought us over, or the captain pulled us in the middle, or someone said, let's do this. And, those little things, those little like moments when you can like give some, it's kind of like the stuff that we don't get to see because we're viewing it and on the sidelines. That's kind of really the interesting stuff that a lot of people would love to hear, and it keeps it light, but it also keeps it, only you would know what that was like, and so it kind of keeps us engaged, and you guys as the athlete as what's going on the court as well. So I would say if you know that you're going to talk, let's say like, hey, Lolita, after tonight's game, we're going to have you talk about it. Just to have certain things in your mind from the game that you can go to that, helped contribute to that win, right? And on the same side, you can, say there are certain things, obviously, like not pinpointing a player, not pointing fingers, but talking about the mood, what happened, certain characteristics that led to a loss, right? And I always like to turn a negative into a positive. So reminding yourself that the losses are about rebuilding and learning. And so how you're going to take the things that didn't work in this particular game and move forward from there. If it's a season-ending one, it's talking about, this is really disappointing. It was a really hard season for us. We're so excited that we got to this point, and this just gives us more fuel to move, to get not just to this point, but move even further. Something that move the needle forward or push the conversation forward. That's not just about there and doesn't keep it in the negative.
Right.
That's what, those are some of the tips. If I knew that I was going to do it, to just have like one or two events that happen, or moments that might not be about a serve or a hit, but they're palpable. Like someone said something important, I looked over and coach gave me a thumbs up, and I knew that was the moment we needed to turn it around. Those kind of things really kind of give really great insight in life to what's happening on the court that viewers and fans really like to know, especially if they're positive.
And to me, like I know I was watching the other night when it was the USC versus the Kansas City, the Kansas game, and it was when they interviewed Juju Watkins, and she's 18 years old. She won't even be 19 until I think they said July or whatever, and they kept that questions on her were all about like how you have impacted the game. And I think the best interview, like the best, most like athletes, is when they never talk about themselves. Like every question they asked her was she always centered it right back to her coach. She always centered it back to the team. Because of course, when you go in the locker room, they're like, "Oh, it was all about you. You won the game,
Yeah.
right?" So, and I was just so impressed with her being, a true freshman and 18 years old. Like she
Yeah.
won't even be 19 until, you know,
I mean, I saw that it just happened with Giselle Thompson, who's an Angel City football player, graduated high school. She's 18. She's now playing professional soccer in her hometown, like as like a high school senior. She just moved into this thing. And so that's like that's a real growing up moment, because now you definitely, like, they have media post and pregame. They have things that they have to do. They have, things that events that she has to go to, that she has to be, to do things, more speaking engagements than even perhaps going to college and playing and maybe having to speak to the camera or something like after a game, or speak to a local reporter or a school reporter. So, I mean, talk about being on that big stage and having to really kind of turn it like that. And she does the same thing about like what she's learning, how she's growing. Obviously she's a sensational player. I mean, she got recruited as a 18-year-old to play professional ball. But how do the other things around her help her? I do think that it's a really like selfless way, especially with the team event. Now, if you're like an individual sport person, it's different, right? If you play tennis or ran a track and field event that is solo, like you can talk about yourself in a more way. And also too, like, you can also talk about your contributions as it matters to a whole. I think I really like when a lot of people will say stuff like, I was just a one woman, like, team, or like even with like UCLA, like it's only because like X, Y, and Z is here, like she's like carrying the team, and it's like you can't do that. You still need 4 of the people on the court. You know what I mean? So I think all of that is really important for our young athletes to really focus on. And I do think that is being noticed more and more, sort of that selflessness of players these days.
Right. Okay. So I think the win or the loss, those kind of go hand in hand. So what about this? You and I talked about this. What about when it's something with like an upcoming game against a rival, right? Give tips on, because of course, some of them might not have had to experience that. It's high schoolers, but as we discussed, and Ashley, of course, shared with you, some of our girls are actually going to some of the, Power 5 schools, the top schools. So give them tips on how to handle those type of probing questions.
Well, and it's definitely knowing that is the atmosphere that you're going to go into. So even before going like to the question part of it, is knowing that you're probably going to go in and, some fans are nice and they love a good rivalry, and some fans are just downright nasty. And so knowing that it's sort of like bubble yourself in and be very focused on what you're doing. But talk about the history. Talk about the idea that like this rivalry is here because of so many years before. And it's great that we can carry on the tradition of knowing that these are the folks that we want to beat. And it's, sometimes it might be for like, for fun and for like that, I don't know, that, that kind of like sense of what a rivalry is. I think it just is like, it's like Harvard, Yale, Yale and Harvard. Like, it's funny, like in the years that we played, Yale wasn't as good as our team, but it was always a rivalry. It didn't matter, right? It didn't matter how good they were in the sport. You just always, it's about talking about that history, talking about the knowing that there were so many women that came before you to do that, understanding that those games like really hype you up. It kind of brings out the best of our team, because we try to play at our best and utmost potential, not just every game, but especially in this one. You know what I mean? To turn those what could be seen as a negative, or if someone's trying to poke the bear to get you to say something like negative, be like, listen, this is where we shine even more, because we know we want to do it, especially against, USC versus UCLA, or like, Harvard Yale's a good one. But just all of those things that when they kind of come together, it's gonna be like, excitement, hype. I always talk about like, like the history of it from before, and like it's like understanding that so many players have already done this and come together to play in these very moments. And so it makes sport more fun, in many ways. So
I love it. Okay, so any recommendations for those that are looking to go into sports broadcasting journalism?
Well, the beauty of the world of sport now compared to when I started a long time ago was it's so diversified. So when I started, there was like local sports stations and you had your ESPNs. ESPNW was kind of just getting off the board, but it didn't have its like own thing. And there was no Yes Network, there was no SNY, there was no Texas Longhorn station. Like now there's so many individual things that you can go to, the Tennis Channel, Golf Channel. There are places that you can go with your particular sport that'll make you like an expert, or you can do more work in those fields there. So I would say like there's an advantage of having uh, different places to put your knowledge, right? Especially in volleyball, you can do, play-by-player color for FIVB or a VP gate tournaments or wherever like there's a need, or the local stuff. Like there's folks that are now doing it for YouTube for the LOVB and the oh my goodness, Professional Volleyball Federation. And so like there's all of these avenues that you can actually like really be able to do that. So the one thing I always say is it's great to learn from a book and to learn in school and have a good professor in classes is awesome. The best education is to actually do it. So find an internship anywhere you can find. Local stations have it. Look for sports at a local station. The reason I like doing sports at local stations is because you do all the sports. You're not just totally defined. If you went, for example, to the NFL Network, you're only doing football. Which is fine if that's what you want to do. And I'm not like knocking that at all, but I'm saying because you do an internship at a local sports station like an NBC, and this is in your hometowns. Like if you're from Houston, my first internship was at the Fox in Houston when I was a junior in college. You get more diversity of topics, and you just really get to cover Dodgers, Sparks, Lakers, Clippers. Like it's cool, right? And you see all of these things, and it also lets you see where you like to be, right? You may have thought you wanted to be a sports broadcaster and be on television, but you really like what the producer's doing. And you love how this other person is allowed to take control and set the show the way he or she wants to see it. And maybe that interests you more than the actual on-air stuff. So internships are really, really key to give you sort of who is in that process that gets you on television, right? That gets that sports center on television. There are dozens of people in between, not just the people at the set doing the talking. So maybe that's something that will like interest you later on. So I would say internships are really good. And if there's somewhere that you want to be a nudge. I'm like the biggest believer in being a nudge. You send an email, you put out a phone call. So I know that you're running Carol Stiff, who I know from being on the Collegiate Women in Sports board for many, many years with her together, is now part of the Women's Sports Network. That's where you want to be, and you've seen some good stuff and you really like it there. Find her, go to LinkedIn, send her a message, be sort of like that person's like, thank you, here's my resume, here's a link to my resume. I'd also say, I'm already doing this with my daughter, create a LinkedIn page. Create something that's a professional landing page for you, even if you don't have a lot of background in any work stuff. Like most people that meet collegiate athletes know that being a collegiate athlete is your job. So they don't expect you to have all of these other things or anything like that. But like having a good LinkedIn page where you can like send to somebody, keeping that active, sending messages through there is always a really good way of doing that. So I would say LinkedIn, find somewhere that you want to be and communicate with that group or that person, and internship. Find an internship in a local town and a local sports department and at one of the collegiate networks. If SNY for the Mets, Yes Network, the Baltimore Orioles have their own station. Like everyone has a network for something. Find it and try to do an internship there.
Okay, great. Yeah. And also, if those that are tuning in, if anyone has any questions, feel free to type your question in on the YouTube chat that we have. And we were going to open it up here just in a little bit for those that have any questions. I'm sure you'll be able to fire away in just a little bit with Lolita. Yeah. Okay, so what would you say? Now, I know you and I talked about this. So, what are practices that you personally engage in your club and with your current team um, to really that impacts, and without a doubt, the impact of the whole athlete?
I was really lucky through the teachings of my own parents. As I said, my father was in, collegiate as well as world track and field for years. So I saw that from my upbringing, but I also had a coach who really understood this. Blending the mental and the physical is so incredibly key. And understanding how a person is feeling up here, as well as how their body and muscles are feeling, is all like sort of centered. So what I really love about our club, and one of the things that was so important to the club owner, Tui is their nickname, Tiara, is fusing all of that. So we actually have 3 practices a week, but one practice is not just court time, but it's strength and conditioning and mental performance. Every team that we have, our top teams, all go through mental performance. We have a word that the team has like created to be sort of their mantra and what they're looking for. For example, our 17th team is resilience, and that's what we go back to every time there's something down. We take breathing moments. We have sessions where we talk about things. It's a lot about making sure that that mental game and learning how to overcome adversity, what's really fueling you, how your body is feeling, and also reminding you that there are things in your control, and how you can do that is something that's really, really important to us as a team and as a whole for all of our players, and starting them really young. Like our 12s team has mental performance, excuse me, not mental health, mental performance, and learning how to switch your brain and think about things is really key. And I think before it was just like play, 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 do, do, do. A lot of it forgot to sort of ask a person or a kid how they're feeling about things. So mental performance for us is good. And then, like I said, with the recruiting part, especially as you get older, it's learning how to talk to people, writing an email. We have little things like if they can't come to practice, if they're even going to be like a second late, we need a text to all the coaches together in one group text. Just that sense of responsibility, that thing that you have to, like, if you were at a job, you can't just like not show up or show up late. Like, what would you do then? And so all of these things that we feel will be key for their future lives, starting that now and knowing how important it is, not just for the team and being able to coach you in the right way, but also how this will affect you in your later life and how you deal with adversities and successes at home and your workplace and that kind of thing. Because we all play volleyball, and many of you may go and play professionally, and that's fantastic, but a lot of you won't. But you'll still use what you have to do amazing things. Look at Ashley with P1440. My friend Kate Johnson runs global sports for Google. She's analyzing and doing a lot of the analytics and all of the programming stuff, and combining Google with things like the WNBA, and just, showcasing a lot of the power of women's sports, and being a part of that. You have Lord and Till with ESPNW. I mean, you can just take what you do and bring it into another part of your world. And I think that those things are really important. So it's really what I love about what we're doing with our team, is trying to create a whole person and wanting the players that leave us to be strong, independent, well-versed, able to communicate women.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking that.
Of course, of course. Okay, so we have a question.
Okay.
That's a great one.
I did not see it. Is it in the chat?
Okay, I'll read it to you. It says, how to talk about my achievements without sounding arrogant. That's a great one.
That is a really good one. And, I'm writing a book about this, so stay tuned, because I do think that we as women tend to think that talking about ourselves is arrogant in and of itself. Regardless of what comes out of my mouth afterwards, like it sounds, I don't want to talk about that because like I think I'm going to sound arrogant. I think that perception is something that we're perceiving. And I can understand that because I think it's societal and cultural. And I think you young athletes are going to be the first to sort of start changing that. I don't think most male athletes think like that. And I think with us is we have like a better perception of it. But I think that you can always, put what you've done in the context of how it helps others. And I think that that's the best way of doing it. Like if someone's going to come to me like I'm, saying something like, I'm really proud of being able to win best defensive player this week, with my 48 digs. I was really, happy with my performance and being able to do that. But, I could never, I couldn't have gotten there if like the blocks weren't where it needs to be, or like being able to have like the team around me that sort of supported me in being able to get myself in the right position. But I'm really proud of like what I've done. I've worked really hard. I've been working a lot on, movement off and on the line. You can talk about it in those terms about like the work that you've put in there to get to that. But I'm a big believer of not being shy of talking about your accolades. I always say with respect and with, the dignity that it comes with, but like, it doesn't have to sound arrogant if you say it in the context of the work that you've put in, because I'm sure it didn't come easy and it doesn't come naturally, and you're not just like, yeah, I'm this superstar. So, but also to consider that when you talk about yourself, especially if you're a young female athlete that's done a lot, like it's not arrogant. You put in that time. And so, try to tell yourself that it's okay to talk about yourself. I know that it's difficult, but, and let people kind of say what they want to say, I always feel there's haters everywhere. So just try like not to focus on that stuff. Cause I'm sure whoever asked that question is probably someone, because they've asked that question, it's probably someone with a lot of integrity who is thinking about others and not herself.
Right. And I really hate that double standard, because I feel like boys and guys in sports, they don't even bat an eye to say, look at me, look what I've done, how I won the game. But I do feel like when girls, like young ladies, when they do it, I do feel like the village shows up and they're celebrated. Like in the car, people do cheer them on, but it's just that first scary thought to, to like speak up about it. But so, okay. Next question.
Love that. Oh, now I see them. Sorry.
Okay.
How important is body language during an interview, and what tips do you have to maintaining good body language? Oh my gosh. Like I said, it is so important. You speak with your face and you speak with your body. If someone asks a question, you go, oh. You already told me the answer, right? So I call it use your core and use your heart. So what I mean by that, so core is sitting up straight, right? Always, like if you feel like you're slouching or like maybe someone else is talking and you do one of this, get back to your core, right? Your core keeps you upright and that keeps you alert. And then your heart, like if you emanate from your heart, like think about it sort of like if you're putting your chest out a little bit, you'll sort of be more at attention, and that will keep you, sort of like in the moment. I know what a 30-minute press conference can be, especially if you're like that fourth person and you're not really talking and the attention's over here and you're kind of sitting there and you're doing a lot of listening. All of that stuff is really important, right? To like listen, to pay attention, to again, sit upright, and just be really aware of your face. Like facial expressions, like especially nowadays, they're like memed and paused and like, redone over and over again. And sometimes it's just going to happen, right? You're just going to do a thing and you can play it off. But I think the best thing you can do is remember your core, remember your heart. And those things can go for like anything, right? If something is like, even in like an interview or you're a part of a bad situation, remember how you want to present yourself comes from your gut and from your heart. So like those two things are just for positioning purposes, but also for how you want to feel mentally that you emote as you're speaking. So just, but that's my biggest thing. And I also do something if I know something's going to be difficult. I have certain things, and like I did it in volleyball too. The way you like bounce the ball or roll it before you serve, right, or whatever. Everyone has like a thing. So I have like this thing that I do with my hands where I just kind of cup them like this, but I'm squeezing hard if someone's making me angry. But you can't see it. You just see me going, oh yeah, that's great. I can't, yeah. And I'm like smiling, but I'm like, like my insides are boiling. And so I'll have like my own little thing. So I have something that like, you can go to that's like, maybe it's like a tap of the finger or something that we already know as athletes. We have these little things that we do on the court for different things. You can have something like that that'll sort of refocus you back in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. That's
Mhm.
awesome.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Next question.
How can I control my nerves? Oh, yeah. Breathing. I'm a big believer in breathing. And again, using that core, like, making sure that it comes from here, not from here. I think that's really important. Repeating a question will help you with your nerves and anxiety. So someone says, what do you think was the most significant part of the game? You're like, give me a second. Let me think about that. I think the most significant part of the game was it kind of lets you focus, and your first couple of words are the question that they asked anyway. And so it lets you, I think the most important and it lets you kind of like pause yourself and get to like the meat of your answer, but using that question to help you, one, put together the answer, but also two, to maybe calm if you're like a speedy nervous person and you're like, you spit out the words at the beginning, it'll let you sort of not lose any of the answer that you really want to give by helping you, by doing that sort of like reiterating the question in the answer gives you a little bit more time to calm yourself as you're answering. But breathing, saying, in live moments, this isn't as easy, but in recorded stuff, you can say, can you give me a quick second and take a moment? You can turn around and, do one of these and kind of give yourself a moment and then come back. Like, don't be afraid to do something like that, especially when you're doing that. But a lot of it is breathing, and I'm a big believer in practicing. So if you have a buddy, if you go to your team, it's not something you guys do now. Maybe after this, you say, hey, coach, I really would love to practice the interview just so that I can get ready in case anything happens, right? We had that situation in Utah, like they were going to dinner and to go play. They had no intention of talking about racism, feeling scared, feeling threatened, nothing, right? And so like, hopefully the team got together and had a discussion about what that meant, what we're going to say, who's going to talk, but all of us sort of being on the same page in case it does come up. Because there's things like, what are you going to put on your social media? What do you tell your parents and your friends? Do you tell them like all the details about it? You know what I mean? Maybe some things where like coaches like, I don't want anyone to talk about this outside of this until there probably is some sort of investigation. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of like little things in there. So I'm a big believer in the practice of the interview. And if you know you're getting nervous and anxious, practice with the buddy. Have them ask you questions, right? Your roommate at home, a sister, a sibling even, to just kind of be, okay, go. And then you do a couple of those and you sort of get a little bit better at it.
Love it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can we have like 2 more questions. Let's see if we can get them in.
I'll get caught. Should I be practicing at near opportunities, or should I wait to be approached by reporters? You usually wait to be approached by reporters on that one. It just depends on what it is. If there is something that you want to talk about, I would go to your communication liaison, whoever it is at your school that deals with that. You can go to your coach, and then from there, every school has a communication liaison, every single one. That's who we go to get interviews with you and be like, hey, listen, like it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I, lost my blah, 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 because I really would love to talk about it because I'm doing this thing in class or in school or as a volunteer. And, those are the opportunities you can seek, but I wouldn't do it with reporters like post a game or anything like that. Let them sort of come to you. And then obviously just be ready to answer. But if there are things that you want to talk about, go to your coach and go to your communications liaison and explain what it is.
Awesome.
And those are good stories, by the way. It doesn't always have to be about the game and the volleyball. Those side stories, like some of the best stories I've done with April Ross was because of her mom. And I'm a breast cancer survivor, and we've connected for years over that. I'm 11 years out, but it was like, and then she was doing some other things and being a part of some really progressive like stuff that was happening, and those became the stories too. It wasn't just about the thread and the through line to get to Tokyo.
You're awesome.
Thanks. You're so sweet. Is there one more?
I think it's one more.
Okay, cool. Any to stay composed during challenging moments. Y'all, I'm a feisty Puerto Rican. Like I mean, and I wear my emotions and my heart on my sleeve. But even as a young girl, and again, as a captain, like I was tasked with doing a lot of the harder things. It could have been like the team wanted me to ask coach something that only like that was not going to be great, or like keeping composed during moments. Breathing, centering yourself, removing yourself from a situation. Those are the best things that you can do. Go to the bathroom, right? Take a moment away from the situation, take some beats, and then come back out. I'm also an angry crier. So it looks like I'm sad, but I'm just crying. I'm angry, so I'm crying. Like it does, like none of those things like kind of come together. So I know I have to compose myself at some points. And so for challenging moments that you think that you need a moment, I would excuse yourself. I would, before the interview, maybe go to the bathroom and be like, hey, coach, I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick. And then I'll do the interview. Can you tell everybody I need 5 minutes, right? Just give yourself the space to reconnect with you. And, and then also if there's a challenging moment that you are not prepared to talk about, say it. Say it. Like, I know something happened on the court. It's something that I'm still trying to process. Right now, I don't want to talk about it. So please respect that. But I do expect to come back to the conversation at a later date. Do you know what I mean? And like, just have a moment where like, you don't want to talk about that thing that just happened,
right,
or a moment that you had because it's a little too emotional. You say it, like right. This is a very emotional time for me. I'm not sure I'm really prepared to talk about this at this time. I think Simone Biles did that really well. Olympics, when she got the thing, she kind of diverted the conversations back to her teammates, right? She was always like, but these girls are going to step up and do their thing. And, right now I'm just going through some moments. I'm still trying to process what it is. I know with the twisties or that physical mental thing, but there's also a lot of stuff going on. And when that I'm not prepared to talk about, but my teammates are great. Jordan, do you see Jordan step up during the bars and the vault? And she just kind of the conversation. And I was like, how clever are you?
right,
How honest, right? Because you love the fact that she was emotionally telling you what it is, but also keeping stuff for herself.
right.
Because that's for her to process out. Like all are all on these center stages where we want to know every little single thing. And it's not our business sometimes to know. But we just want to know. We're like curious and we wanted those things, but some things are for you until you're prepared to do them. And I also will say, if there is something that's big, that's huge, that you guys want to talk about at a certain date or something big like that, let's say this Utah thing, like find a trusted reporter, someone that you've known about, that comes to you guys, that writes good stories for you, and go to that person, right? Let those people that you trust, that have like followed you and been good to you, and they're fair in their reporting and their assessment of you all as players, you're as a team, let them be the ones that you go to when it's a moment to tell a bigger story.
Right.
That's the only thing I would say too.
And some coaches just handle it well too. Like I love Dawn at South Carolina. She does that, I think, probably the best. Like when that whole fight scene, I mean, you didn't see one South Carolina player interview after that. She took it for the entire team and apologized on behalf of the school. But there were not any, and still I don't think any of the athletes have interviewed but the other school they did, right? Yeah. And that was, she's like, we're moving on. So I mean, sometimes the coaches
and it's also not like not talking about it. That's also a thing that like I really just detest. Like if there's an elephant in the room and we're not going to talk about the elephant, there's a right. But in the way you talk about it, and that's a good example of how two different coaches use them. I actually love both of those coaches. Handled it differently. But then kind of kind of came to like a happy middle, like in the moment they handled it a little differently. And then I think like once the dust settled, it was like, okay, let's just be on the same page in terms of how we want to communicate. Because
Right.
when that becomes a story, you forget all the other goodness, like
Right.
the game, like the sport itself. And so it's a refocus. And I think everybody knows
Right.
what it can become if we let it get out of control. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
great job. I know
Thank
you were
you.
dashing to practice right after
Yeah.
this. So your team is probably happy that if you are gonna be running in, but thank you so much, Lolita. I know it was so many nuggets and jewels that you shared with all of us, and
Yes.
Ashley was right. She knew that you were the perfect one.
Oh, thank you so much. And just, remember to just be yourselves. Like we're all very different, like you might have someone who's a more shy person and someone who's more vocal. Like you're not supposed to be any one thing. Just be yourself, play your game. And if you're an authentic person and authentically you, that comes out, period. Yeah.
So you have 64 ambassadors and coaches, and that will all be cheering you on when we're
Oh,
Eiffel Tower. So
thank you. I'll have to give you like a little nudge so you
yeah,
know.
when you do that,
You guys get the ear.
okay.
Well, have a great night, everyone, and good luck in your seasons and everything. I can't wait to watch.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.